Thank you for inviting me to talk about how Republicans can win in California. It's no secret that we are surrounded by Democrats. I was a history major in school, and historians have a theory, maybe you've heard it, that Christopher Columbus was actually the first Democrat in America. The evidence is pretty strong that Christopher Columbus was a Democrat. He left Spain not knowing where he was going. He arrived not knowing where he was. And he sailed home not knowing where he had been. And he did the whole thing on government money. My name is Shelley, and I am running for Congress because Republicans have to win the argument against big government. This is an argument conservatives should not lose, and yet we do lose it. How do we lose it? Like this. We say we're against big government, and they say, so, you want children to breathe poisoned air. We say we're against big government, and they say, so, you want to get rid of Medicare and Social Security. We say we're against big government, and they say, I guess you don't want roads, bridges, dams, national parks, clean drinking water, and homeland security. And then we say, wasn't that a great World Series? How about those Cardinals? We have no answer. We have no answer. We end up with Republican lawmakers saying things like, well, we'll just raise taxes a little. We'll pass crazy regulations that are a little less bad. That's the wrong answer. I am running for Congress to make the conservative argument against big government, to win the argument against big government, and to win the election and do something about it. I'm going to tell you the secret of how liberals win the argument over big government. They argue their intentions. They ignore the unintended consequences. And they get away with it. They get away with it because the intentions are present at the beginning. The intentions are present when they sign the health care reform law, when they sign the credit card reform law, when they sign the bank reform law. The intentions are rosy and wonderful. It's only later that the unintended consequences come slamming through the wall. Double-digit increases in health insurance costs, lack of available credit, higher bank fees. Those things happen later, long after the liberals have been pictured on the cover of Time and Newsweek. Sometimes the consequences take so long to arrive that it's easy to blame them on something else entirely. And then they're addressed with some new piece of legislation that has, you guessed it, good intentions. But an intention is not an achievement. An intention is not an achievement. Whenever a liberal Democrat proposes some massive new law for some rosy and wonderful purpose, we should not fall into the trap of arguing about the purpose. Instead, we should point out the unintended consequences of the law. We should show everybody some research with footnotes about what happened the last time that massive law was tried. We should never let the good intention have the story all to itself. We're not going to let them talk about the health care reform law without talking about higher premiums, higher deductibles, higher copays. We're not going to let them talk about endangered species without talking about unemployment. We're not going to let them talk about higher taxes without talking about businesses packing up and leaving the United States for countries that know how jobs are created. We used to know how jobs are created. And I'd like to talk a little bit about exactly how big government damages our economy and what we can do to reverse the damage. When our country was founded, it was the first time in human history that a government had been based on the idea that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights. Now, what did that mean? As opposed to what? What was the other system used in other countries? In other countries, people had a certain status. and governments bestowed privileges on certain people with a certain status. It's another way of saying it's who you know. But in the United States, no one had special status. All men are created equal. We were not a society of status. No rank, no titles. All men are created equal. They are free to deal with each other as equals. It wasn't who you know that mattered. It was what you can do. This has been called the society of contract, not the society of status, the society of contract. This is the system that made the United States the most powerful engine of economic growth and prosperity in the history of civilization. The power of government was limited. People were free to do the kind of work they wanted to do and enjoy the rewards of it. They didn't need anybody's permission to buy or sell or build or trade or work or spend. In a society of status, the government screens every decision. Permission is needed for everything. The economy of this kind of society just stagnates. People literally die waiting for the government to give them permission to live. And this is the problem with big government. We are a society of contract that has been gradually turning ourselves into a society of status. More and more, you need the government's permission to do anything, to merge, to build, to keep the money you earned yourself. There are many different ways that the federal government has grabbed power, but I would like to look at just 3 of them. First, the tax code. Tax rates in this country are deliberately set too high, and then the government gives out generous breaks to people who do what the government considers the right thing. It's a mechanism of control. They're not just raising revenue. It's a mechanism of control. They can control the tiniest details of your life and your business just by offering tax deductions and credits. Now think along with me here. I'm a novelist. Think along with me in the realm of fiction. If we magically amended the Constitution to repeal the entire tax code and replace it with a 5% flat tax, overnight, the government would lose the power to control all of your decisions through tax credits, tax deductions, tax breaks, and tax breaks. Overnight. If we locked it into the Constitution, where not just the income tax, as the 16th Amendment allows an income tax, but it doesn't set the rate of the income tax. If we put the rate of the income tax in a constitutional amendment, Congress would not be able to change it. Their power to tamper with the economy overnight would be gone. If we could magically amend the Constitution to repeal the 16th Amendment and replace it with a 5% flat tax on income above a level that Congress set to exempt people of low means. We can talk more about that another time. Or you can check my website for details. There's an article called Restoring the Raise, as in, I got a raise. Does anyone remember that phrase, I got a raise? How long since anyone here, or their kids, or anyone they know, came to you and said, I got a raise?
Nobody.
It's been a while. Yeah, back in the silent film days, I think is when that happened. A second power-grabbing mechanism is environmental regulation. We all want clean air and clean water. That's not in dispute. That's not a question. But the federal government has turned environmental regulation into an all-purpose restriction on absolutely every economic activity. What's their real goal? To control the Earth's climate, or to control every productive enterprise in America? Here's a hint. When was the last time they got a campaign contribution from a cloud? A third power-grabbing mechanism is the robbery of the state's tax base. By overtaxing the American people, the federal government has made it impossible for the states to raise enough revenue to meet their own responsibilities. So the federal government gives the states money. Money for education, money for police, money for roads, healthcare, you name it. The money comes with strings. And those strings strangle the states and rob them of the power that was reserved to them by the Constitution. So in order to reverse the damage caused by the government, we need the state legislatures to wake up and realize that they have more power than they think. They actually have the power, under Article 5, to amend the Constitution even if Congress refuses to go along with it. Now this is something interesting. Through the means of constitutional convention, the framers made sure that the people of the United States had the means to go around the national legislature just in case the national legislature ever turned out to be the problem. Just in case. Let's talk about immigration for just a second. The American people are upset about illegal immigration, and the Congress refuses to do anything about it. Come back with me into the realm of fiction, and let's talk about amending the Constitution to do something about illegal immigration. Congress, of course, would not vote for it, but suppose the states, very upset over what they're spending, decided that they wanted to amend the Constitution to take a page from the Prohibition Amendment and give the states dual jurisdiction to enforce immigration law, so that immigration law could be enforced not just by the federal government, but also by the local police. Immediately, if we amended the Constitution to do that, all those federal lawsuits against states like Arizona would be over. If we did that, the states would be constitutionally empowered to enforce immigration law. But we don't have to do that. But if we threatened to do it, we'd get our calls returned a lot faster. If we said, how much are we spending on illegal immigrants? We don't necessarily want to deport everybody. There are families where there are citizens and illegal immigrants in the same family, and we're human. We understand these are difficult situations. And of course, we have to take some responsibility for the fact that our government for 30 years has not patrolled the border. So we have this situation. But the money that it's costing us should be reimbursed by the federal government. And they're not going to do it unless we have some leverage. If the states were to talk about, just talk about, amending the Constitution for dual enforcement, they would be forced to deal with the fact that the states have the constitutional power to go completely around the Congress and amend the Constitution without it. It's a lot of leverage. The American people have more power than they know. And political power belongs not to the people who hold it, but to the people who grant it. And that's the message I hope to bring to the voters of the 30th District. With your help, I'll be able to afford a great big megaphone and make sure that they hear that message. And I would really appreciate your support. You can pick up a button and an envelope on the table on the way out, and I really would appreciate it. And I want to thank you so much for listening and so much for inviting me today. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.